Thank you for joining Dr. James, Rini, and I, the Curiosity Conduit, for a look behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Please feel free to add comments or ask questions below, and make sure to subscribe and like. Dr. Rini or I will be happy to answer any questions you have. Today, we will be discussing the second pathway, which is to achieve awareness of the conscious and unconscious minds. This conversation may lead to feelings of inspiration and curiosity, and it could create some inner movement. That's all welcome. Life will reveal your destiny through all opportunities you keep yourself available for. So, allow yourself to stay open, and let's see what destiny delivers. Okay, so we are going into the first portion of this, and I want to read it directly out of your book. It says, achieving an awareness of the conscious and unconscious minds that improves the flow of energy and information from one brain to the other and one mode of thinking to another. So this is the second pathway. What is meant by that?
Well, in order to have a good relationship, you kind of need to know each other, do you not?
Yes.
And part of a relationship when it starts is getting to know each other. And then if that relationship builds, you experience life together and life events, and then you learn more about each other in terms of how you handle life events, and whether you're good at it or bad at it or need to learn this or that. So conscious awareness is one person in the relationship. Unconscious awareness is another person in the relationship. And it's helpful if the conscious mind is aware of how one person operates. Like my wife, she's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. And early in our marriage, she said one weekend, she goes, last weekend we were out and we were doing things and going places, but I know you're an introvert. Since we did that last week, let's just stay home and hang around the house and chill because you're an introvert and you like to do that. So see, she has awareness of herself. She has an awareness of me. And through both awarenesses, and we're able to have a balanced relationship. Because she goes, oh, we did what I want to do last weekend. Let's do what you want to do this weekend. And she's very good at doing that, which then allows us to balance rather than compete one over the other. So having an awareness of the conscious and unconscious mind and how they work allows you to be more comfortable and more understanding of how the energy flows between those two brains. And in the process, you get the benefit of having both of those systems to guide you and help you achieve the things you want to achieve.
So I'm going to go into this next quote, which directly ties into what you were talking about. And then I'm going to explain something that came up in my mind when you were just giving those examples. So, an awareness of conscious and unconscious thinking potentials also makes it easier to have a balanced relationship between the ego and the self. So, there was a point when I started to really consciously have an awareness of my unconscious mind and just seeing what it could do. And I started to have this crush on myself about it. And because it was very cool to learn this different part of myself that I wasn't so aware of that was there. Would this be an example of more of how more of a balanced relationship is
Well, yeah, because you
happening?
became aware of a part of yourself that is a part that you weren't aware of. And once you're aware of it, then you can make use of it or eliminate it, whichever, the case may be, if it's a negative. So yeah, that's why awareness is such an important gift that we have, and even more important to utilize it properly.
What are some signs for an individual that they're starting to have more of a balanced relationship between their ego and their self?
They're less conflicted. They have more integrity because the ego and the ego is the president of the conscious mind. The self is the president of the unconscious mind. So they have all this power that they can wield, but they see the world in different ways. The self is there from the beginning. It's a matter of letting it unfold and grow and emerge. The ego is the thought police. It says this is okay to think, This is not okay to think. And in that process, then it can repress and it can deny or disown important parts of the self because it's not approved by the ego. And that gets people in trouble because most people are ego driven than self driven. And then it gets even more confusing because when some people are more self directed, then they're called selfish, you see, which again, the ego doesn't like to hear. No, I'm not selfish. So it'll move away from that self-directed behavior because it's been mislabeled as selfish behavior, and the ego doesn't want to be seen as selfish, so now it's moved back into ego behavior rather than self-directed. So it's that ability to tell when something is authentic. You know, when I wanted to study psychology back in 74, as I've said before, you were totally counseled against it. But I knew myself well enough, it is what I wanted to study. And so all the fear mongering that I was given, none of it took place. In fact, it's just the opposite. In the year 2026, it's totally the opposite. Mental health is like, in the forefront of everything. Where back in 1974, when I went to college, it was buried so deep in the earth that it was non-existent.
I know we've kind of been talking about this, but this quote for a while here, though. But wanted to make mention. You talk about selfishness. And there's one thing that I've been seeing on social media quite often, and I've heard people talking about it, where there is a difference between being selfish and taking care of yourself.
Or as I like to call it, self-directed. It is the self that's directing your behavior, not the ego. Like, for example, the ego is invested in image. So the ego can motivate you to lie about yourself so that you look good. Where the self will want to be more authentic. Okay, so if we are much more egotistical, we're going to be much more defensive, much more in denial, and more likely to fake it so that we can project the image that we want. But none of that is real. And then after a while, a person, fake it till you make it. You've been faking it for so long, you now believe it, but it's still fake.
It is. That's. I mean, I think that's everywhere, and with lots of individuals as they're growing up and trying to figure out who they are. So, I mean, that's so
And
common.
it's so hard, especially in this day and age, because we're confronted. I mean, you just see with sexuality and people, all the different things people can fall into or see themselves. It's much more confusing than it was 10 or 20 years ago.
Yes, there's
And that's
a
just
lot more
with
options.
sexuality, let alone all the 9,900 other things we have to reconcile.
Yes. Okay. So I am going to move on to the next quote. And I'm like forcing myself to do this without glasses because I forgot them because I haven't been wearing them off and on.
Well, I could read the quote.
You want to read the quote?
Yeah, I'll read it since I wrote it. I mean,
All right. You go ahead and read that. Let's see how it sounds.
okay. To have a working relationship with the unconscious, the conscious mind must learn how to interpret the actions of the unconscious mind. This learning includes viewing the unconscious as a force invested in your well-being, even though it does not always feel or seem that way. As I like to say, the unconscious loves us. And in loving us, it's there to protect us and guide us to where we belong to be.
And what does that mean? It doesn't always feel that way. Is that when the ego is stepping up and giving you some other feelings to interpret what's happening?
Yes, or people have told us these things about ourselves. If somebody pays you a compliment, oh no, that you don't believe the compliment because you told yourself or other people have told you something about yourself for so long you can't believe it. Or your mother may say you're smart. Oh no, I don't believe it because it's my mother who's telling me. And of course your mother's going to tell you you're smart, which isn't true, but people think that. And then it's a way to dismiss a way of learning something about themselves. But we have to tune into the unconscious, that's part of it.
When you're talking about interpreting the actions of the unconscious mind. So, because it is a working relationship.
And it's hard to interpret or understand something that isn't perceptible in how we normally perceive things. You can't hold it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't do anything with it.
Oh, you can feel it though.
you can feel it because that is one of the things, it's like air, you can't see it, but you can't live without it. And because you can't see it and because it's everywhere, you usually don't think about it until you're without air, when you can't breathe.
Right.
Okay. So the unconscious is like that. It's this silent partner that's always working in the background, but you can catch it perceiving. Like one of the things, and it's hard to catch it unless you know specifically what it does. Like, one of the obvious ones is people will pun and go, no pun intended. It's because the unconscious puns. It's not the conscious one that puns. It's the unconscious. And we pun much more than we realize, because somebody has to point it out to us. Okay, so the other thing, the unconscious is emotional. Well, we have lots of mindsets against emotions. You're weak if you cry or you're feeling. You're not a man if you feel. So then we deny, we disown, we repress those feelings. The feeling is a sensory function. Like your eyes are a sense. You don't close your eyes because, oh, my eyes deceive me. Or only weak people look through their eyes. So we've made this out to be this terrible thing, feelings. And then the other thing about the ego, anything it doesn't understand, it's threatened by. So as far as the unconscious, for most people, either they don't believe it exists, or secondly, they're afraid of it. So in not believing it exists and being afraid of it, we can deny it, we can disown it, we can repress it. We use alcoholism as an example. In order to recover as an alcoholic, the first thing you have to do is own that you're an alcoholic. Because the alcoholic is the last person on the planet to know they are an alcoholic. Everybody else knows it before they do because of the denial, because of the conscious denial. They don't want to own that because it's a negative thing. But you have to own it before you can then treat it or deal with it yourself. Because once you own it, you understand your behavior better, and then you have to start regulating that behavior, which is not allowing yourself to drink, essentially.
So I do like that example. I want to bring up examples that I think happens often in our society, and even maybe the listeners that may have happened to them. So you talk about how the ego, it will come into play when somebody's feeling like insecure about people, and sometimes we'll start to treat or tear down that, treat them bad or tear that person down based upon their own insecurity. Would that be an example, like with the ego
That's a
jumping in?
very common example, yes.
Okay.
And it's very destructive, of course.
It is, but I wanted to bring this up because I see it often.
So here's how I would ask a person to interpret their insecurity. They're on a growing edge. Being self-conscious is being on the growing edge. That you're on the edge of growth. You can retreat back into comfort, or you can take ownership. Hey, I have an inadequacy here. Let me work on strengthening it and making it adequate. As opposed to, oh, you're a piece of crap because you think you're better than me, or this, that, or
Right.
the other. That
It's an opportunity. It's a good opportunity.
Yes, but see it as that, like most people don't like anxiety. I mean, who would? But when I get anxious, the way I look at it now is I'm on the growing edge. It's an opportunity for growth. So rather than back away from it, I decide to move forward because I want to grow. And as we're talking here, I'm delineating the differences between the conscious and unconscious. And that's the place to start. The other thing about the unconscious mind is we often do things that we don't understand about ourselves because we're doing it unconsciously. Somebody may ask you why you do that. You go, well, I don't know. Well, whenever somebody sincerely says, I don't know, it means they were doing it unconsciously. Sometimes people say, I don't know, which really means I don't want you to know. That's a different I don't know than I don't know why I did that. Okay. So things we don't know how we do them or why we did them is unconscious. That's how Paul McCartney wrote his songs. They were very much unconscious. They just came to him.
Well, I think a lot of artists write like that.
Right, but he accepted that. He noted that and would let it happen. As opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to write a song and sit there, wait, I can't think of anything. Where when it's unconscious, it just flows. In fact, you can't write fast enough to keep up
Right.
with the information with this unconscious. And that's the beauty about when you really are good at letting your unconscious do things, everything becomes effortless. Anything that's done conscious is effortful because the conscious mind does things intentionally. The unconscious mind does things automatically. So think of the energy you save if you could do things automatically rather than effortlessly.
That's nice. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next quote.
Okay, you want me to read it?
Did you like reading it?
Well, I'm the one that wrote it, so it's easier for me to read it.
I can read or you can read. Please go ahead. I like hearing you read this.
All right. The quality of the working relationship that the two minds have with each other will determine whether you achieve self-health or fall into self-sabotage.
So it's really echoing what we were just talking about.
And that's true of any relationship in life. Okay, if you think of two people, the better working relationship two people will have, the healthier the relationship will be. The poorer working relationship they have, the more it will run into unhealthy relationship, or if it's just yourself, self-sabotage. When you don't listen to yourself, it's a form of self-sabotage.
And we built the foundation on the previous recordings of a lot of what we're talking about here, but I really like being able to talk about the two minds because I think it's very difficult for people to wrap their head around that, the idea of that.
No pun intended.
So it must be
It is
discussed.
It is. And unfortunately, there's so much distance between where we are today and people understanding the two minds, even though we know more about the two minds today than we ever had. In learning that is one thing, but in how we've applied it in life, we've become very one-sided. Everything has become digital. Analog has been thrown away. And analog is much more powerful. Not as easily replicated, but it's much richer, much more powerful than digital. And then you're only using one. You're not using analog and digital. So we're all left brain. We don't, in the right brain, the unconscious doesn't quit working. It's just not a working relationship. It goes rogue because the conscious mind isn't able to work with it.
And when you say it goes rogue, what does that mean?
It's like a drunk driver. The conscious mind becomes a drunk driver because it's lost all sense of judgment and rational control that is given to us by the unconscious, by our true sense of self. People get into relationships and they say they lose themselves. What does that mean? Well, it means that I've given everything up to be with you. I don't hang out with my friends anymore. I don't go to the gym anymore. I don't go to my favorite restaurant so I can hang out with you. And at first that seems right because my ego is so adoring of you and so glad to be with you that I do it willingly. Yeah, but at a certain point, the relationship is going to be unhealthy because you've lost yourself in the relationship. And I've heard people go, no, I don't want to be in a relationship because I lose myself. No, it's the key is have the relationship, but not lose yourself. Because either way, if you get in the relationship and you lose yourself, you're incomplete. If you don't get into relationships in order to not lose yourself, you're incomplete because you don't have a relationship. And we need a relationship to be completed.
And all I hear is that that person understands the concept, but they don't trust themselves, which this is what helps with that. These pathways and being able to be more connected to yourself so you can trust yourself.
Well, and we have an obligation to host and honor ourselves. And if you don't like yourself, either you need to change yourself because there are things that you're doing that you don't like, or B, you need to learn how to like yourself.
And part of that is recognizing what we were just talking about. You had the first part of awareness and then of the self, and also having the awareness of the conscious and unconscious minds, working on those relationships. We'll get into those actions and everything later, but I think this is a good means to help start with that.
And, going back, how can you recognize when your unconscious is working in you? It happens automatically. That's the best way. Something that happens without any conscious intent,
And I think it is
you know?
always working.
It is always working. It's whether the conscious mind is able to have a partnership with it as to whether or not it's working. Like people sleep, but they dream. And I've had people come in, no, I don't dream. I never remember a dream, so I must not dream. No, you have to dream or your cognitive functions will deteriorate rather rapidly. You just aren't, you're not being allowed conscious awareness into the dream. So see, there isn't a working relationship if you don't remember your dreams, because if I don't remember it, how can I work with it? So the unconscious is always working, but it's a different form of awareness than conscious awareness. So you have to learn how to have that awareness because it's not conscious. You can make it conscious, but it's not naturally conscious.
And I would say from the things that I've learned to sit here and say, "Oh, you have to do this or that." It's individual to it's not just one size fits all answer on how to do that.
But it's also what we become to believe. Like, I'll use this one. This is very common in therapy. Clients come in and they go, "Oh my God, I'm rambling." Okay. Which is what you want the person to do. You know, as I like to say these days, I speak ramble, you know. And here's why it's important. Because really what they're saying is, no, I really ought to think through and sort through and only tell you the things that I think are important. See, but that's the ego talking. When the person is rambling, that's the unconscious talk. And if we go back to the very first person with Freud, what he did with therapy was free association. Because through that free association, he could then dig through all that and discover what the problem was. Where if it's the conscious mind a lot of times doesn't know what the problem is. And it has an idea, it has an but like I've said before, the conscious mind is most often wrong in its interpretations. So one of the things is that when we're much more spontaneous, we're unconscious. When we're doing things automatic, when we feel safe with somebody. You know, people say when you're home, you can let your hair down. You're much more unconscious. When you're in public, so you got to be much more aware of your P's and Q's and dotting your I's and crossing your T's. So it's a lot more work. You know, a colleague of mine was interviewing at the university for a position there, you know, and it's an all-day interview. They got to take him to lunch and to meet everybody and everything else. And I saw him at the end of the day and he says, he goes, being nice is a lot of work. I'm exhausted. Well, because he couldn't be his natural self. He was his hosting self, which is a lot more work than, I'm just going to sit here and relax, which you can do at home. You can't usually do that in public. You have to have some sort of persona, you know, not that you can't be that way public, but you can. But most people have a persona, that mask they wear, you know. So it's always a lot less work, a lot more effortless to be unconscious.
So, information's being like pushed up, and it has to do about my comment at 12:50 on Thursdays.
Yeah, just before we meet.
I was like, "Oh, I'm on the edge of growth," and then the word was wrong. So the anxious feels like excited. Anxious was not correct. I get excited.
Excellent. See, a reinterpretation there. And there's a big difference. I mean, they're both excitement. One's negative, one's positive.
Yeah. So okay, now how did I correct that? I feel better now.
See, and see that I feel better now is powerful, because see, whenever a client says to me they leave here feeling better, that means I have increased their neural integration. If they feel leaving worse, I've decreased their neural integration. In other words, I've helped them consolidate their thinking to where it makes sense, rather than coming away more confused than they came in. And that was a perfect example there, is how you mislabeled some without even knowing you mislabeled it. Is I kept talking,
I knew I did it quite soon after, but I
couldn't find the right word yet.
well, no, I just didn't want to like interrupt, and I'm like, I got it. Keep going.
You did it. And now you could substitute the new word, which feels a lot better. Excitement is a lot better than anxiety.
Yes.
I mean, in their true form, you know. And that's the way the system works right there. That one little thing, if you did do that 10 times a day with stuff, even one thing can make a huge difference. So like going back to, you know, rambling versus, I've written down everything and I'm going to read to you. I got a list of all the things that are about them, which people can do the first few times, but after so many sessions, so when you're rambling, that's nonlinear. That's unconscious. When you're linear, when you have a list and you're listing off all the things that you think are wrong or why, that's conscious.
I like it. Would you like to go on to the final one?
Yes.
Please read it. I love listening to you read your quote from your book.
Quotes.
Yes.
I'm quoting myself. People who have a secure sense of self have challenges that are similar to those that confront the insecure. They just handle them differently than someone without a sense of self. Okay, so what that means is I can have a problem, you can have a problem. You choose to deal with that problem by getting drunk. I choose to deal with that problem by going and talking to the person that I have a problem with and reconciling that.
But why am I going to get drunk?
Was
I'm not either. You're getting drunk and I'm going to talk to the person in this scenario.
Well, it's just an example how we can both have the same challenge, but not handle them differently. A secure person will confront their challenge. An insecure person runs from a challenge, where there's alcohol, drugs, running away, distractions,
Or doing things that
eating,
it like cuts down the person.
or cuts them down.
Yeah, or talking behind their back to something.
But it's all motivated by an insecure ego.
Yes.
Now, for me, see, the way I have taken insecurity all my life is I want to know how I'm insecure so I can develop it and not have that vulnerability anymore.
Be on the edge of growth.
It's like being afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore.
Oh, you were afraid of the dark?
What kid isn't afraid of the dark?
Oh, kid. Okay, maybe I was older than that when I got over it.
But we have to get over our fears, for example, unless we want them to haunt us all our lives. It's not a good idea. I was shy. I was introverted. I felt very inadequate. That's not something good to have for a lifetime. So, and going back to that sense of self, because it is a sense. If I'm insecure, I'm going to sense that everybody is against me and people are talking about me and they're laughing at me and they see all my inadequacies, none of which is true, but because I am insecure, that's the narrative my senses are going to write. Well, whereas if I'm secure, it could go the other direction, just as distorted. Oh, everybody loves me. Oh, they think I'm the best thing since sliced bread or whatever, That's inflation. That's not secure. That's inflating your sense of self, okay? A secure sense of self can embrace both their inadequacies as well as their gifts equally.
That resonates with me.
And that creates balance. There was this pitcher, Greg Maddux. He pitched for the Atlanta Braves. He won the Cy Young Award 4 times. What the Cy Young Award is, you're the best pitcher in the league. And there are a lot of pitchers in the league, okay? Because you got relief pitchers, you got starting pitchers, you got middle relief, you got tons of pitchers. 4 years he won it. You're lucky if you win it once. And that was without steroids or any drugs whatsoever. It was purely... And anyway, the point of the story is I watched the end of a game one time, just a normal game. And he had pitched it, he won. And they always interview the person. He goes, whenever I win a game, I look to see what I could have done better. And whenever I lose a game, I look to see what I did that worked. He goes, and that keeps me emotionally balanced. And that's kind of what I'm saying here, but in his own words. Because then you create a win-win situation. Even if I lose the game, I still win because I come away with something that I did that I can do better.
Yes, and that is that self-reflection.
Right. And willingness, to admit you can do better, for one, and see it. And then even if he loses, if he wins because there's something he can do better. If he wins, then it's a double win, because not only do I win and get the win from that, but I also look to see what I could have done better, so I win again. Most people put themselves in no-win situation. It's best to put yourself in a win-win situation.
Yes, that's what I prefer.
Like many years ago, I had a first date with this girl. She canceled. I go, well, look at the money I saved. You see, it was a win situation.
That's what you thought?
That is the first thing I thought. Look at the money I saved. Because I don't need someone to have fun. I mean, I trust me, I wanted to go out on a date with her, but as opposed to, oh my God, there I go. I got rejected again. I'll never get a date. Nobody likes me, so I could have gone that direction, but I made it a win. Look at the money I saved. You laugh, it's true.
Because I think that's the ego speaking.
Well, the ego can be helpful. It's not there, for no reason at all.
That was some good stuff there today. Thank you for joining Dr. Rini and I on this journey behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Join us next time as we will learn about the third pathway under awareness, contributing to the means of achieving self-health and development. Remember, questions or comments are welcome below. Now ask yourself, what part of your life might destiny be trying to speak through right now? Keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, destiny isn't something you chase. It's something you allow. Until next time, be well.